Hello and welcome to Tennessee Informer. Thank you for joining us tonight. Buford Pusser of Walking Tall fame has been portrayed by Hollywood for decades as an honest but tough police chief from West Tennessee trying to clean up a dirty little town controlled by criminals. He was made famous in the early 70s as a 2x4 wielding fighter for law and order, but that appears to be a stretch, and in fact, if he were alive today, he would be indicted for the murder of his wife, Pauline, according to not only an independent investigator, but the TBI as well. Now to our guest, the independent investigator, Mike Elam. Thanks for coming on. How are you doing, Mike?
Well, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with all of this.
Well, in the early 70s, I was involved in law enforcement. I was really young, started out as a jailer, dispatcher, and just gradually worked my way up like most people did. Back then, there was no certification process that you had to meet in the state of Arkansas. That didn't come till years later. So I got into the private sector after a little while, and simply because there was a lot more money to be made there than there was in law enforcement. And it was one of those things where I was director of loss prevention for a grocery company and took care of investigations, insurance fraud, employee theft, all sorts of shrinkage problems, executive protection, a little bit of everything.
Right.
And then the company eventually sold to Walton Enterprises, and that went for about 7 years. And then Sam Walton sold the company back to the original owner, and the original owner in turn sold it to Walmart. Walmart wanted me to take a region in loss prevention, and it just didn't work out. My wife's family was having all kinds of health problems, and it would require that I relocate, and I just didn't feel like the time was right for that. So I left that, and in the meantime, a captain out here at Bella Vista, where I live now, asked if I could come in and help him out because he was shorthanded. And so I did. I didn't think I was going to stay long, but by this time, after a year, you had to be certified. So I went to the academy, passed it, got back in, and stayed with it for a little while, and finally decided I was getting too old for everything that went on.
So when did you first get involved with the whole Buford Pusser story, and what made you investigate specifically the death of Pauline Pusser?
Well, back in the 70s, when I saw the movie Walking Tall, I thought it was a fantastic movie. I didn't buy the part about him enforcing the law with a big stick. I thought that was a reach, but I thought the rest of it's probably possible. And I wanted to learn more about him. But of course, back then, there wasn't much of a way to do that. Information was difficult to come by. And so it was in the early to mid 90s when Al Gore's internet came out, and I started researching it. There still wasn't a lot of good information yet, but as it matured, things began to develop. I started a YouTube forum chat group, and we'd get on and talk about Buford. Then I changed it over to Facebook, and I started using that as a fishing hole, just trying to learn more about him. And one of the things I soon learned was there were photos out there of his car after the ambush and Louise Hathcock's autopsy report. And of course, she was one of the state liners. And neither one of them made sense to me, because in her autopsy report, it showed that she was shot in the back twice before she was shot in the head as she lay on the floor. Something that I learned was never shown to the grand jury that investigated her death. And then the other one was the photographs of Buford's car. And the blood spatter on the hood was what really caught my attention first. in that it shows that somebody was shot in front of the car when he was saying that he never got out of the car. And so I started using my Facebook page as a fishing hole for information. And over the years, it just piled more and more information up until finally I had an individual step forward that said he thought he possibly had the gun that was used in the ambush. And so that's what got it rolling.
Let me ask this back up to Louise Hathcock. So it showed she was shot in the back twice before she was shot in the head.
Correct.
Okay. And so who all would have, obviously the coroner and I guess maybe a couple of assistants would have seen that. Who else would have seen that, would have had to have seen that?
Well, actually, it had to go before the medical examiner, the local medical examiner. His name was Harry Peeler, and the district general attorney, or attorney general, and that was Will Terry Abernathy. And by protocol in Tennessee at the time, and I believe it's still pretty much this way, those two men had to concur on the need for an autopsy report. And, you know, like in Louise Hathcock's case, they did. And then they didn't show it to a grand jury that investigated her death, which allowed Buford to kind of slip through the cracks on it, I believe. And then later, a year and a half later, Pauline is killed. And they decide not to do an autopsy on her. A sheriff's wife that's murdered doesn't get an autopsy, but a state liner did. That was a little telling to me.
So let me ask you this on the Hathcock autopsy. So they'd had an autopsy, but they didn't present that evidence to the grand jury?
According to James Opal Gray, he was a member of the grand jury that investigated her death, and he was later sheriff of McNairy County. And I'd called him up one day to interview him about all this and about the state line. And he was telling me, well, by the time I was sheriff, there wasn't much going on down there, you know, and if you didn't go looking for them, they didn't come looking for you. They mostly preyed on tourists that were passing through, because back then 45 was pretty much an artery going from the Gulf Coast up north. And I didn't think I was going to get anything out of him at all, because he was saying, you know, he didn't have any problems with them. They were pretty much gone by the time he got there. And I didn't think I was going to learn anything at all. And then he said, but then I did sit in on the grand jury that investigated her death. And I asked him about the autopsy report. And he told me they didn't see an autopsy report. That basically all they saw were photographs that were close-ups. And they just listened to what the district attorney general had to say. And they ruled it as a no true bill. And because I asked him directly, I said, how could you return a no true bill after seeing the autopsy report? And that's how we got into that conversation.
And nobody asked for the autopsy report out of that whole jury.
Well, they didn't know that one had been performed. The members of the grand jury didn't have any idea that one had been done. And so they just ruled on the information they were given by the district attorney general.
Yeah. And so unless you knew what to look for in those photos, I guess you wouldn't, and if they weren't pushing it that something looked strange, then I guess if you were a juror, you would just, I don't know. It seems to me like they had to turn their brain off for that one a lot, but anyway, okay.
Well, there's a question about whether it was unintentional or intentional that they did exactly that.
Right. Okay.
One of the things that I learned recently, for instance, and this had to do with Pauline's recent autopsy, is that Harry Peeler, when he examined her body, did not put down the same location of the shots to her head as were found in the autopsy report. So there you had, once again, Harry Peeler conflicting with what the state had found. Pardon?
You're talking about the recent autopsy, because you said originally
Right.
that they didn't do an autopsy,
That's
but they did
correct.
an autopsy in recent years, the TBI, I guess, right?
That's correct. Um, when I contacted them in 2023 about finding a firearm, that's when they got interested and uh, went over there, met with them, shared a lot of the information that I had, and they interviewed the person that had the firearm, and he surrendered it to them for testing, and that kicked everything off on their end, and they reached out to Pauline's brother, and he gave them permission to exhume her body, and it was quite a long period of time, but there were multiple forensic examiners that were checking into that, and they all agreed that it didn't look anything like the way that Buford described.
So how did Buford describe the ambush?
He said that the ambush itself, he said that he passed New Hope Methodist Church going 50 miles an hour. It's 4:45 in the morning, and he said apparently this car gave chase from there because it was about the only place they could have been. And in 7/10 of a mile, with him going 50 miles an hour, they were able to catch him without having to turn on their headlights. Well, when you start doing the math, which I actually did, you found out that that was impossible to do. And he said that he had arrived at the bridge when they pulled up beside him, and a couple of gunshots rang out, and that she was wounded at the first ambush site. So he said he stepped on the gas and drove another 2 miles, and he thought that she sounded as if she were choking. So he pulled over on the right side of the roadway, and he stated in his statement that he was looking directly at her when she was shot in the forehead. And he said that they had pulled up on the left side of the road, that there was enough distance between the two cars for a third car to have possibly passed between them. And so that is not a close gunshot wound, anything that would leave stippling, and stippling being the burning of the powder that's embedded in the flesh from it being so close. So when they did the autopsy, it showed that she was shot from behind in the back of the head, not in the forehead, as Buford said.
With a 30 caliber.
Correct.
And what kind of distance do they think the shot came from?
Oh, we're probably talking 10 feet or so.
You mentioned blood on the hood. You mentioned blood on the hood a minute ago.
Correct.
How far out on the hood was that? Was it like just past the window shield, or was it further out?
Oh, no, there's blood all over the exterior of the car. However, when you look at the blood on the hood, a lot of people aren't familiar with blood evidence. But for instance, when a droplet of blood, like from spatter, strikes a flat surface, it makes kind of a teardrop shape. And the point of that teardrop points in the direction that the projectile was headed. And so someone was standing in front of that vehicle when they were shot. And Buford said neither of them got out of the vehicle. That's what he would tell the press. But he told the TBI that after Pauline was shot, he was shot, and he fell on top of her. And it was several minutes before that he raised up and saw that they were still sitting there. And he said he jumped out of the car, traveled that short distance, grabbed a hold of the barrel of the carbine, and was yelling at the driver, "Get out of here, get out of here." And said the driver even had to start the engine for them to leave. And in the meantime, Buford gave details about what the shooter was wearing: plaid shirt, sleeves came down to his elbows, He was dark complected, but not too dark. He combed his hair to the back. Uh, all kinds of information that you would not think that a person who is under that much stress and has been wounded himself would remember. But yet he remembered in great detail a lot of things that allegedly happened.
How many
And
times
that
was he shot, and how many times was she shot?
a little difficult to say how many times exactly she was shot because there was so much damage to her head. Uh, it was hard to tell, but once, of course, and probably twice. He was shot one time. And of course, there's all sorts of stories out there that he was shot in the jaw and hit 3 times and it blew his jaw off, and none of that is true. Uh, the forensic examiners that looked at photographs of his face said the jaw was not blown away, that it was not broken, that it was close contact wounds, and they suspect that he took his .357, tried to graze himself, and that he possibly even stuck the barrel down between his lip and his gums and pulled the trigger. And just the compression from a shot like that just tore his chin up.
Right.
And so you go down through that statement, it's 3.5 pages long. And he gives all sorts of details about what happened, what he did afterwards that really brought him into question. And yet at the same time, he's telling the media a totally different story. So, that was concerning.
So nobody raised this at the time? Nobody brought these issues up at the time?
No, as a matter of fact, when I visited with the TBI just recently, basically, I've been told, and I was at the press conference on August 29th, and they stated that if, he were alive today, he'd be indicted for Pauline's murder, and that they were surprised that he was not arrested the moment he stepped out of the hospital. But back then, we have to keep in mind that they went by the name, the Tennessee Bureau of Criminal Identification. 1980, a whole new set of things came in. That's when they became the TBI, and they became a lot more professional about what they do. And so there's some people with the TBI that are perplexed about why that Buford wasn't arrested in '67.
Were the local, so the forerunner of the TBI at that time that investigated,
Right.
were they local or were they out of Nashville or Memphis or whatever?
Well, the local office, I believe, was in Jackson, which is about 45 minutes or so north of Selmer. So it was Warren Jones and John Sloan who were the two investigators, with Warren being the lead investigator on the. And I've interviewed people that said that Warren couldn't understand a lot about the story, and he was telling law enforcement people that they needed to get Buford off the streets, but yet for some reason it didn't happen. And I don't know, that could go back to the district attorney general of that time that kept that from happening. I don't know.
What do we know about the connection between him and Pusser? What kind of relationship did they have?
They were friends. They had a good relationship. And so I've had questions about that. Plus, people have to remember that Ray Blanton was a member of the House of Representatives at the time, and that he had a lot of power. And both of those two men, Buford Pusser and Ray Blanton, were both from Adamsville, a town of 2,000 people.
And Blanton
So
went on to be governor.
he went on to be governor. Pusser, a Republican, campaigned for Blanton, a Democrat, and there was a lot of stories that, and of course these are difficult to verify, that Blanton was going to put him over the Department of Public Safety. Of course, Buford was killed in an auto accident first, and so that never happened.
When was Buford killed in the auto accident?
He was killed on August 21st, 1974.
Okay.
Walking Tall had been a hit movie by that time. And that very day, Buford had signed a contract said to be for $2 million, which was an unheard of amount of money for someone to get back then in Hollywood. But, you know, that's the story that went around, which would be the equivalent to about $14 million in today's dollars.
Wow.
And for a total unknown but they felt like it was worth it, I guess, with him going to play himself.
Right.
And of course, there was a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors. They even alluded to it in the sequels that, you know, the state liners finally got him. Totally not true.
I have a question from the chat line on that.
Okay.
And this any consideration that Buford intentionally crashed his car as a means of suicide over guilt? I realize he was ejected, but I had to ask this. So anybody ever say, you know, he finally felt guilty enough over killing Pauline that he killed himself? I mean, was that ever a theory? I'm asking the question from the chat here.
Only among the people that don't want to think that Buford was involved in all the nefarious situation that he became involved in. The night of the accident, Buford's blood alcohol concentration was 0.18. I interviewed the trooper, Paul Irvin, that worked his accident. And he said that when he had turned the report in, they didn't accept it. They wouldn't tell him what was wrong with it. And I just told him he needed to revise it. Well, he kept revising it until the last time. He said the only thing he changed the last time was he took out the fact that Buford was intoxicated. And when he took that out, his report was golden. They accepted it. And so, you know, of course, that's created a lot of stuff about, well, then the trooper, you know, lied in his report. Well, if you were Paul Irvin and your supervisors keep handing it back to you saying you need to revise it, you finally figure out what they're wanting you to take out.
Right.
And of course, when he did that, they took it. And
few things we talked earlier today, and there is another site called Buford Pusser, the other story. It's a Facebook site. I just saw it today, and it was brought up, and so they've got their concerns, I guess, about your investigation and even the TBI's portion of it. And so I'm gonna ask you the questions that I read from this. I'm not saying this is all of their questions, but these are some of the ones. So the blood on the hood, the post said that, okay, the blood was where you would expect it in reference to Buford and Pauline inside of the vehicle, but then there was blood on the hood and I guess on the outside of the windshield. And the blood tests on those were inconclusive who they belonged to. What's the response on that?
That's what I understand, that the tests were inconclusive. But the bigger question is, how did the blood get on the outside of the car?
Right.
And why does it indicate that someone was standing in front of the car and the projectile was headed toward the rear of the car? No one has answered that question.
Okay. Another thing they brought up was the vehicle that the TBI tested this on, tested the scenario. Now, I'm assuming they did their test based on what Buford told them about the attack or the ambush.
Correct.
Okay, so can you kind of set that up for us? And then obviously if they used a newer model vehicle, there's less metal, there's more aluminum, there's more fiberglass, so on and so forth. What did they have to do to make that a legitimate test? And why are you confident that that test with all the variables that they had to take into account is accurate?
Well, they set the shooter up in basically the same position as what Buford described the as the Cadillac being in, saying that the shooter was in the front passenger seat. You have to keep in mind that the windows on the sides, passenger side, were both blown out. The rear window on the driver's side was blown out. The driver's window was rolled down, so it did not get hit. On the outside of the car, there were 2 bullet holes in the door post, which indicated that his door was open at some point and it was shot. And Steve Watson, who was deputy director of the TBI back before they really closed their files up as they do now, did answer a letter from Jeffrey McLeese, who was a police officer in Baltimore, Maryland, and described all the shots as basically going through the side windows. There was one that did strike on the passenger side of Buford's car down low, and there was some strikes like on the in the dash area of the car, but that was it as far as metal was on the inside of the car. And the part that got me was I thought the TBI did a great job because they went and found 2 agents that were with the Bureau. One was 6'5", one was 5'4", so they would match Buford and Pauline in size. They positioned them as best they could, knowing what Buford had said.
Right.
And they couldn't get the scenario that Buford gave them to work, indicating that, as I understand it, that for her to have been shot in the forehead, it would have had to have gone through Buford's shoulder and into her head because of the height difference. And then whenever you compared his statement to the imaging from the current autopsy, that did not match his story. But they did try to duplicate everything as best they could. And they said, it's not 100% accurate, but it's one of those situations where you look at the efforts they put into trying to get it to be as identical as possible. I think they did that. And, one of the factors that always bothered me was Dennis Hathcock was the person who found the shell casings the next morning and went back to the first ambush site to report to him down there that, hey, the bigger part of the ambush apparently happened down here. So they went down with him. And the location of the shell casings were scattered, not like you would expect to find them from a person who was sitting in one position, but rather from somebody who was outside moving around. That was about the only way they could get it to explain how the windshield was hit over here and the back panel behind the passenger seat that connects the back windscreen, it was hit on the inside, and that required a certain amount of movement that couldn't be explained by the shooter sitting in a stationary position in that Cadillac, as Buford described it. You take that, you take the blood spatter, you take information on the blood evidence inside the car, the void that is on the door there where Pauline, if she had been in my opinion, I don't know if they've got this in the report. They probably do. But that spot where there's a void should have a lot of blood spatter, because if she was sitting up, as he described, she was hitting the forehead, and at some point she was on that door panel. You would expect to find
A lot of blood.
blood spatter
Yeah.
in that area. So it appears that they've determined that most likely she was shot in front of the car and placed in there, and that's the reason why it's not covered in spatter.
Any idea on what motive? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Any idea on what motive he would have had for killing her?
Well, there's a couple of ladies that were at a state line joint where Buford and Pauline had an argument, and she had threatened to expose a lot of his corruption. She knew he was having an affair, and I think she knew about a lot of the payoffs that he was taking, so on and so forth. And I think Pauline felt like she had to do something to make sure that she got custody of Dewana in the death. That was the only biological child that the two of them had. All of her other children were fathered by Pete Vance, her first husband. And of course, they were Buford's stepchildren.
Right.
And so Pauline would have ended up with them, but I imagine that she wanted to make sure she also got Dewana, and she knew she was going to be going up against the sheriff, and that it was going to be difficult with him in a position of power. And so she was going to report what he was into, and allegedly he made some comment to her. I don't know the exact words, but if you try that, you won't live to see the light of day. And next thing you know, she is dead.
Let me ask, the other vehicle that Buford described, did they ever, and granted, it depends on, what the weather had been lately, but, normally vehicles leave some sort of prints. Sometimes you can get tire tracks. Was there any evidence that a vehicle had been there?
The road had just been freshly maintained with chert and oil. You know how they put the oil down, then they put this grayish white gravel on top of it, and that was the road surface. And I don't know of any indications that a car had been there. I've never heard of it. Haven't fully seen the TBI report yet, so I don't know what they determined on that. But it was
so it was on the hardball. It wasn't on the grass. I thought. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought it was.
Oh no, it was on the roadway.
Okay, all
right. When you watch the movie, it's the version of it that they show in the movie is just totally fabricated. Buford never left the roadway. He was sitting right there on the road when they pulled up on the opposite side of the road. Now, if they had been down in the ditch, because it was really a narrow road, I questioned whether or not a third car could have even come close to getting between the two. The ditches had been freshly bladed out just a day or so before. If they had gone down in the ditch, their tire tracks would have been there. Nothing I've seen to indicate that. So there was another thing where Buford's story didn't seem to wash. The other part being that he kept trying to indicate that it was a Cadillac like W.O. Hathcock's. And W.O. owned the Plantation Club, where in the movie they called it the Lucky Spot, where he was beaten, cut up, robbed, thrown out, left for dead. And when you check into that, you can find no police reports, no medical reports, no photographs of his face, and any injuries that allegedly resulted from that. You can't find witnesses that ever saw him with his face all cut up like with that, because he said it took 192 stitches.
Good Lord.
to sew his face up. But you know, I haven't even found where his mom and dad addressed that. So you would think that if he was cut up so badly on the head and face, that one of them would have spoken out and said something about it.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to ask you some
okay,
questions from the chat, okay?
sure,
I think we have one of your fan club on here, okay? So I may not
okay,
ask all of them, but I'm going to ask some of them. Okay. He's asking about the 0.18 blood alcohol. That was presented. You saw that. The officer told you that he put that in his report initially, and
correct,
he had to have it removed in order for it to be. But that was the officer that investigated the wreck.
correct.
Okay.
And a deputy from McNairy County at the time, David Killingsworth, was there when the blood draw was made by the medical examiner. And, he told me that, yeah, Buford was intoxicated. Different troopers went around and interviewed several people that encountered Buford when he was at the fair. After he left Memphis, having signed a contract to play himself, he went to the fair, kind of showed that in the movie in a way. And while he was there, he spoke to several people, and several of them reported that they could smell alcohol on his breath and that he was carrying a cup from Coleman's barbecue around, and they didn't know what was in it, but they could smell alcohol. And so there you have that. It's kind of
Okay.
corroborating evidence that Buford was indeed drinking that night.
Okay. What about? Okay, you mentioned the gun. The guy that I guess presented the gun years
Correct.
later. The 30 cal.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
Okay.
When was that present? I mean, when did that come
That was,
about?
I think, back in May of 23. He said he had followed my page for several years, never so much as commented on it. And he finally determined that I wanted to know the real story and find out who killed Pauline. And he said he thought he had the gun. And I thought, oh, good gosh, I've heard this story at least a dozen times and it never goes anywhere. And finally, he told me who he was. And his name is Ricky Plunk. His dad was Petey Plunk, one of Buford's deputies. And he told a story of how that Buford, the morning of the ambush, made contact with Petey, told him he needed to go down to Sibley Chevrolet, that his car was there. He needed to get the guns out of it. And basically, I guess, in so many words, make them disappear. And for some reason, Petey kept the 30 caliber carbine. And years later, he gave it to Ricky. And, as he got older, he began to wonder about the story himself. And he said that he was so concerned about it that he wouldn't keep the gun in his house. He'd keep it at another location. He just didn't want it around. And, when he started hearing all this about Buford, and it started to click and make sense. So he called me and was basically saying, hey, what should I do with this thing? So I contacted the TBI, and they reached out to him. He gave them the gun, and they still got it. I don't guess he's going to get it back now.
Probably not. And so they did a ballistics test from the casings they originally found back in 67, I guess.
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what all they've done with the gun. So, I'm not able to really comment on that without having gone through the files to see for myself what they did do with it. The thing that got me is that people don't seem to understand is that, I provided a lot of information, because after that, the TBI reached out and said, well, what else do you have? And I told them about Dennis Hathcock being the person who found the shell casings and reported them to the authorities back at the first ambush site.
How many shell
And that
casings were there?
I think there were 14 that were found. And the thing is, no one ever asked Dennis to give a statement to a formal statement to the TBI about finding them. And so he wasn't interviewed until I introduced him to two agents one day.
Where were the casings all these years?
There's been a question about that because some of them disappeared. And the TBI did a check of everywhere that they could think of to find these. And, Warren Jones kept an office in Savannah. He also worked out of Jackson. Of course, most officers have an office at home. And it's my understanding right now that whenever they started trying to trace them down, the last person who had the casings was John Sloan. Well, he said, I gave them to Warren Jones, but there's a chain of custody that you follow where you have to sign for evidence.
Right.
And John Sloan was the last one to have actually signed for it, not Warren Jones. And then it's my understanding also that they recently found 2 boxes of various things in the closet of Sloan's son. And he voluntarily allowed them to do a search, and they found some shell casings and such in one of those boxes, along with a file from the TBI, so on. So,
but there has not been a ballistic test done on the weapon produced, matching it up with the shell casings at the time.
Well, I'm not saying that they're up to that point. I don't think there had been. I don't know what they've done since. So the thing that people don't understand about the TBI is, even though I was sharing a list of people, witnesses, things that they had told me, and they told me that, yeah, I'll speak to the TBI. So I was passing all these names off to the TBI.
Right.
They weren't passing anything back to me.
Right.
In the early 80s, the legislator there in Tennessee came out with a protocol that TBI doesn't release their files to anyone. Even if I understand it correctly, even if you're a member of the Senate or the House there in Tennessee, you could view it, but you couldn't take copies of it. You couldn't do anything with it. It had to remain where the file was read. And so done to take all TBI investigations, because before then it was heavily influenced, I guess.
Right.
And so this is only, as I understand it, the second time that they've ever released an entire file, and that they did so simply because after the movie Walking Tall made him such a law enforcement icon, they knew that people would not want to believe that Buford possibly killed her.
Right.
And so they decided to just disclose everything that they'd been able to learn, what they found, who they spoke with, everyone's names that gave any information. Their names are in the file. Ricky Plunks is out there, along with a lot of others that I gave them their names. I know that they interviewed Kirksey Nix to see if he had any involvement. And, he told them that they didn't. Since then, Kirksey and I have become phone buddies. And he calls me quite often.
Who is Kirksey Nix again?
Kirksey Nix was a member of the Dixie Mafia.
Okay.
And he was alleged to have killed Pauline accidentally, according to some, on purpose, according to others, to make Buford hurt the way that Towhead White hurt whenever he lost whenever he lost Louise Hathcock. Uh, when the state line really got started, Jack and Louise Hathcock were married. They got divorced in 1957 before they even completed building the Shamrock. But yet they continued to work together just like they always had in the previous clubs that they had had. And so then whenever Towhead was arrested for what they referred to as the three-state moonshine operation, he was the only one that was connected to the alleged state line. And I need to explain that here in a moment. That was involved in moonshine. The Hathcocks didn't want to be involved in moonshine because that could bring federal charges. What they wanted to do was bring in bootleg whiskey from places where it was legal to get it and bring it to McNairy County where it was illegal to sell it.
Right.
So if you got caught doing that, you were going to get slapped with a fine and such as that. You were going to lose your inventory that they found at your place of business, so on. But it wasn't like you were going to go to a federal penitentiary for having it bootlegged in.
Right.
Towhead had different ideas. He wanted to be the Al Capone of the South. And so he set up this elaborate moonshine still, and originally in McNairy County from the stories that I've heard, and that he moved it down to Tishomingo County, Mississippi. And he was in the process of getting it set up down there. 6 days in, authorities arrest him there. Now, why Buford couldn't do it when he had it up and working in McNairy County, I don't know. But it took Sheriff James Bishop about 6 days to get the job done. And so Towhead did end up in federal prison. And it was during that time that Buford killed Louise. And so then, of course, the story got started. Well, this was Towhead's revenge for killing Louise.
Right.
Nothing to back that up.
Right.
That's just a story that they tell.
Did they ever find a blue Cadillac like Buford described?
Well, no, that's another oddity. He described this blue Cadillac, and he described it as one that belonged, like one that belonged to W.O. Hathcock. And it almost appears that he was trying to say, you guys need to look at W.O. as a person that was involved in my wife's death. And of course, W.O. was the one that had the club where he was allegedly beat up, cut up, robbed, left for dead. Well, that didn't happen. Well, they did find the Cadillac, and W.O. had sold it sometime before to a dealership in trying to think of the name of the place where Elvis was born.
Tupelo.
Tupelo dealership down there had it. And they, from what I've read in other sources, not the TBI report, but they did check the soil, gravel, everything that was attached to the undercarriage of the car. Nothing matched that from the state line area.
Did they do any tests on the inside to see if there were any powder, powder residue or anything like that?
That I don't know how extensive their investigation in that car was.
Right. Let me ask you this: the TBI, they basically said if he were alive today, he would have been indicted for the murder of his wife.
Correct.
Okay. So we don't have eyewitnesses. We don't have, or you don't know what they have in terms of the ballistics on the rifle in the shells. We don't know what, if anything, there is there. Correct?
All I know is that they say it was connected to the ambush.
They meaning the TBI.
I haven't read the file yet, so I don't know what that connection is. But I won't see my copy until Wednesday.
Now I admit the way Buford described it, and we talked about this earlier too. So it just seems scattered, okay, as far as his story goes. And if you want to hit on that some more, that's fine. We can do that. But so did the TBI say what was the evidence that they would have indicted him on? Just so the audience hears specifically.
I think it's a compilation of things. Nothing in his statement checked out. You've even got one part in there where that most people don't understand. When Buford arrived in Eastview, where he and Pauline were found, Chief Hugh Kirkpatrick took his gun and told Buford he'd clean it up, so on and so forth. I don't know what happened to the gun. I don't know if it had a shell casing in that where he had shot himself, or if he had removed that bullet and put another one in. It was a revolver.
Right.
And one thing a lot of people don't understand is that Buford and Chief Kirkpatrick were related because he was related to Buford's mother. So, he and Buford had more than just a law enforcement experience together. Their families were related. So, when you read the statement, there is something in there where Kirkpatrick, when Buford is saying something that might incriminate him in Pauline's death, Kirkpatrick is telling him to shut up. Don't say anything more, And
that's in the statement?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
That comes from Danny Howell, who was a deputy.
So do we have that statement? We have, the TBI has the statement from Buford from the night of that, and you've seen that statement from the night of the ambush.
I see that statement whenever they're speaking with Denny Howell, who was a deputy that heard all that conversation.
Okay. So this is Mr. Howell saying that he heard the other sheriff tell Buford, shut up, don't say anything else. Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
And so when I say it's a compilation of things, you look at nothing in Buford's story is adding up about how the ambush went down. You look at the forensic evidence, and by that I mean the blood spatter evidence that's all over the place, the trajectories that didn't work out, as Buford said. You have the time and motion that are involved from the time that that Cadillac would have taken off from behind the church, trying to chase Buford down in 7/10 of a mile in darkness with no headlights, because Buford would have been out of sight. They wouldn't have been able to follow his tail lights like some people suggest, but yet they managed to catch up with him.
Right.
They would have to have reached a speed of something like 100 miles an hour in the first 14 or 15 seconds and maintain that speed throughout that run to the bridge there where the first part of the ambush took place, for that to be possible. And that doesn't add up.
Right.
You take that none of Buford's suggestions, at one point he's saying he can identify him. Next thing you know, he's not able to identify him. He was even taken over to Oklahoma, where he was shown suspects, and they had to say, nope, that's not them. And it was like, for a person who was in law enforcement, he was the most unhelpful person. But the bigger thing is that I focus on is you have all these different parties, forensic experts, that don't necessarily know each other. One's looking at images where another one's looking at blood spatter.
Right.
And they're all saying there's something wrong, very wrong here.
Right.
And you don't get that many different people from various fields of science, of forensics, that are all saying this isn't adding up. Right. And so you have that. So I don't know if there's any one specific thing that was a smoking gun for them.
Right.
All I know is that, nothing I've ever seen in all the years that I've looked into this, I have found nothing that backs up Buford's story.
Right.
I mean, even if you go back to Pauline's best friend saying that she heard a shot come from the house. Buford's stepdaughter, Pauline's daughter, said that she heard a pop and that she saw Buford carry Pauline out, put her in the car, and drove away with her. Carl, I am told, and I haven't read this yet, but Ward Moore, the county coroner, told me that Carl had called him prior to the ambush and said, "You need to get over to the house. Buford and Pauline are in a fight and they're about to kill each other." Ward Moore goes over there, and I guess he called the coroner. The only reason I can think he called him is because the coroner can arrest a sheriff. And when Ward got over there, they were gone. And he said he looked around, all he saw was a couple of droplets on the carpet. And he said it wasn't spatter like from a gunshot wound. It looked more like maybe somebody had a busted lip or something like that. He didn't know. And then later, I was interviewing a lady that told me basically the same story that Ward had mentioned to her. They were at some kind of EMT training or paramedic training, and she introduced herself to Ward because they were from the same area. And so they got to talking about Pauline, and Sandra offered other information other than just that. There were times when people would ask Jim Moffitt, and it's my understanding it's in the TBI file where they asked him who he thought killed Pauline, and his answer was Buford Pusser.
Now, who's Jim Moffitt again?
He was Buford's chief deputy.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, for your chief deputy to make a statement that he thinks his boss killed his wife, that's a pretty big leap to make in case if you're not sure.
Now, what time frame was he asked that, and when did he give that response?
I'm not sure of the time frame, but it was sometime, of course, after the ambush. And
but before Buford was dead.
Oh yeah, Buford was still very much alive. This was in '67, and I don't know if Buford ever found out that that Moffitt had told him that. But then, after Louise Hathcock's death, Moffitt was there standing in the hallway when Buford shot Louise, and she was in the room, and the door was almost completely closed. Moffitt couldn't see anything, but he could certainly hear things. He went home that night and told his wife and his oldest son, "If anything ever happens to me, you don't need to look any further than Buford Pusser." And then later he told, after the ambush and before Buford left office, Jim told a coworker when they asked him about some of these things, about why he left a couple of times. And he said, "Well, I was afraid I would be next." And I imagine that Jim felt like that
he knew too much?
Knew too much. And so Moffitt was scared of him. And Moffitt was a big man. I mean, he was almost Buford size. Can you imagine those two coming to a call together? And it would be like you're going up against a WWE wrestling team.
So I know you've gotten a lot of resistance from some of the people there, and I'm sure you're still.
Oh, yeah.
I'm looking on the chat, so I know you're still getting it.
Yeah.
But are there people that you've talked to there who like Jim, and others who are like always thought that Buford did it, that felt like that?
Oh.
Yeah, that was they knew it. It was just they didn't have any proof, and they maybe didn't want to say it to too many people, but Were a lot of people
Yeah,
not
you
shocked
know,
by the idea? Let's put it that way.
one one thing you have to understand is that, especially in Adamsville, uh, man, this is a political hot potato. When I talked to Paul Urban, the trooper that worked the accident, he was also later a sheriff there in McNairy County. And I asked him, I said, "Did you ever think about investigating this while you were sheriff?" And he said, "Oh, Lord, no." He said, "Why would you?" He said, "McNairy County is funny. It's about 50% Republican, 50% Democrats. And you start looking into something like that," he said, "you got to remember being a sheriff is an elected position." And he said, "So you automatically alienated half of a voting base." And he said, "There was no good that could have come of it uh, for anybody who tried to investigate it for that very reason." And, especially around Adamsville, because the family has had so much, I don't know what you'd want to call it, influence, political power,
Right.
whatever, that nobody wanted to go up against that story just simply because of all the wrath it would bring down on them.
Yeah.
So it was just easier to keep quiet, go along with it, than to say, "Hey, look, somebody needs to take a serious look at this."
Now, she was not from around there. She was from somewhere else, right? So she didn't have a lot of family there?
No, she was from Hayside, Virginia,
Oh, okay.
and she had moved to Chicago. Uh, she'd worked at a motel, cleaning rooms such as that, and she moved to Chicago uh, just because there were job opportunities there. And she got up there. She met Buford at the Buccaneer Club, which was a place where he wrestled, and they had a short relationship before they got married. And ironically, here they get married on December 5th of 1959, and on December 12th, I believe it is, 1959, just a week later, Buford's down at the state line and allegedly robbing the plantation club. So, you had to wonder what that was about, that he would, and he admitted to a reporter from the Tennessean that he and the others perjured themselves by saying that they were never there in Tennessee uh, when the plantation club was robbed. And they had worked it out with a coworker to punch their time cards to make it appear that they were still in Chicago. And so basically, Buford's own words are saying that he committed perjury.
Right.
That people like to forget about that part.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. I'm glad the TBI got involved in this. I've been told that it wouldn't have happened had I not found the firearm. Like I say, I'm not sure exactly how that firearm ties back into all this, but the fact that Ricky Plunk's not getting the gun back tells me a lot.
Yeah.
And I imagine we'll find out. The TBI today is a very different organization than they were back in those years. They're much more professional. They're far better trained, and they're tenacious. This is a job they did not have to take on. They could have just ignored it and let the legend stand. But when all this came up, they decided that justice is justice, and she was murdered. And if there's a chance of finding out who did it, that was a case that needed to be closed. And they understood the repercussions of this when they got involved.
Right.
And still yet, they did it. And I've got to admire them for that. They didn't fold to a lot of pressure. And of course, there's all these groups that I call the willfully ignorant. And I know that's a harsh thing to say, but it doesn't matter how much evidence certain people see. They are never going to believe that Buford did it because they saw the movie Walking Tall. And when someone refuses to look at the evidence and just wants to go strictly from what they know from basically a movie, that's a sad state. It kind of takes you back to other things like the old O.J. Simpson trial.
Right, right.
You know, where a lot of the evidence pointed at him, but the makeup of the jury didn't allow for a real verdict.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way it is with some of these people. They just don't want to look at it and see the truth.
Yeah. Now, you have a website and a Facebook page?
I have a website and a Facebook page, both. I say a website. I have a YouTube channel and a Facebook page, both. Buford Pusser, the other story. It's the same thing as my book that I wrote back in 2020. That was 5 years before the TBI got involved in all this.
Oh, okay.
Where I told a lot of the story then.
Right.
And
that's on Amazon, right?
That's on Amazon. I've got it also on eBay. But I'm working on a second book now about basically just about the ambush, all the evidence that I've seen, and I'm getting my copy of it, of the file, like I say, on Wednesday. I'm going to take a look at it and see what's in there that I don't know about. I'm sure that in my telling of the story, I missed a lot of stuff. I don't have the resource and include people, other people that are going to write books and are writing books about all this. They have no idea the process I went through to get it to the point where it could be investigated, and what all we found when we finally got there. So,
well, hey,
that's my gist.
I thank you for being with us. I appreciate you spending the time. It's been interesting, and I'd be curious to hear when you get your report back, things that you did, that the TBI discovered that you didn't know about, or what they were able to piece together. So,
and like I always end my stuff with, I always remind people that truth has no agenda. So I guess that's where I'd like to leave this today.
All right. Well, hey, thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
And I appreciate you having me.
Anytime. I want to thank everybody for being with us. Take the time to watch the program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Thanks again to Jonathan and Mary League for their financial support from July to October. You guys are great. We really, really appreciate it. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. A meet and greet with Monty Fritz Tuesday, 6 to 9 p.m., October 21st at the Coley Farms. That's at 740 Sam Martin Road in Dandridge, sponsored by Empowered Severe. The Henry County GOP will host a meet and greet for Monty Fritz, who is running for governor in 2026 on October 23rd, 6 p.m. at Tom's Pizza, 2501 East Wood Street. Arrive early, please, if you intend to eat. The Stewart County GOP will host a meet and greet for Monty Fritz on October 30th, 6:30 p.m. at the Stewart County Visitors Center. If you haven't heard Monty speak, you need to. Next week, our guests will be Kathy Harms and Andrea Gomez of Tennessee Fair Elections, here to discuss a proposed election bill of rights. Our second show that night will be Josiah and Samantha Baker of the Mises Institute. He'll join us to talk about the mission of that group and their role in it. Hope you can join us. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.